Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I will tell you about the thing that we must do in chess. The first thing is castling. So why we must castling? Castling is to create safe for your king and to develop your rook, bring it out nearer to the center the board where it can get into the king. So there is some rule in castling. The rule is the king has not moved yet, and your chosen rook does not move yet, and there is not must be a pieces between the king and the chosen rook. Next is the king is not currently in check, and next is the king must not end up in check. Next thing to do is to control the center. So why we must control the center? Because the side who controls the middle of the board usually has more options to play and dominate the game. So this is the center of the board. If we look at this board, the white pieces is controlling the board. So the white pieces has more opportunity to control the game.
We all know there are 4 general principles in chess. In this video, I'm going to explain 2 of them. The first one is developing your pieces, and the second one is your pawn structure. So now let's move on to the first one. You can see that all of the pawn is blocking the pieces at the back. So that is why you need to develop your pieces. Pieces that you can develop first is your knight and also bishop. This is because knight is the only pieces that can jump around the board. This knight can just jump here or jump here. The second one is bishop. This is because bishop can cover a multiple square, either the black square or the white square. So this is why we want to develop our knight and also bishop first. So now let's move on to the second general principle in chess, which is pawn structure. The first one is a good pawn structure, and the second one is the bad pawn structure that you want to avoid. So the first pawn structure is what we call it as a pawn chain. So if you can see on the screen right now, all of this pawn is lining right here. Call it as a pawn chain. Each of these pawns is actually protecting one another. For example, this pawn right here is protected by this pawn at the back, and this pawn right here is protected by this pawn. So the next pawn structure is what we call it as doubling, or a double isolated pawn. So this is what we call it as doubling. This pawn structure is considered a weak pawn structure because neither of this pawn can protect one another. And if you can see this pawn at the back, it cannot move unless the pawn at the front. You need to be careful not to do this kind of pawn structure.
In chess, so these 2 are the basic one. The first one is touch move. It means once you touch the piece, you must move it. So for example here, when you already touch your pawn at d4, you must move it to d5, because if you don't move it but you move the other piece after you touch this pawn, it will considered as a touch move. So the second one is to screen the board. The first one is to make sure your position is right, and then to prevent you from doing unnecessary move in a game. So if you look here, your knight is in danger. So if you don't realize it, by moving the other piece without saving your knight here, you will lose your knight. So for example, you move your pawn to b4 without realizing your knight is in a danger. So the opponent have the opportunity to take up your knight here. So to conclude, there are 2 don'ts in chess. The first one is touch move, and the second one is you shouldn't forget to screen your board properly. So that's all from me.
Thank you. That you should thoroughly want to avoid when you are playing chess is bringing out your queen way too early in the match, because their mind, when they think about queen, their mind is think that the queen is the powerful piece in the board. So they will play pawn e5, e4, and then immediately queen to h5, because they will help the opponent will do a mistake, like for example knight to f6 attacking the queen, then queen to attacking the pawn at e5, capture, and then check the king. The problem is, when you bring out the queen too early, the opponent will be aware of what you are trying to do. So they will start to develop their pieces correctly. We can see that the white is only trying to move around his queen everywhere. So sometimes the queen may block other pieces to involve in the game. So whenever you're playing chess, try not to bring out your queen too soon.